Hey guys, Miss Sheila here. Today we're going to talk about the fun and exciting topic of sentence patterns. Get excited. So, you may or may not realize this, but sentences actually follow a pattern. There is a rhyme or reason to the madness that is sentence structure. And specifically, declarative sentences, which we learned about last week, follow three basic patterns. So, the three patterns that we're going to talk about today are the subject plus action verb pattern, the subject plus action verb plus direct object pattern, and the subject plus linking verb plus subject complement pattern. So, when you're looking at these three patterns, you'll notice that every sentence has a subject slot. Every sentence has to have a subject. If it doesn't have a subject, it's not a complete sentence. We learned about that last week. A noun is going to be in the subject slot. There might also be a pronoun, and there might be modifiers like a, an, or the. The subject is going to tell us who or what the sentence is about, and it's going to give us that general information of who's doing the action in a sentence that contains an action verb. Sentences also have to have a verb slot. You'll notice that in all three of these sentences, there is a verb. Whether it's an action verb or a linking verb is up for debate, but there's a verb in all three of those sentences. So the verb determines whether or not other slots will be required and what those other slots are going to be called. So essentially, the verb is the boss of the sentence. What the verb says goes. So when you're looking at these three sentence patterns, you should notice that there are some similarities within each having a subject and each having a verb. And there's also some differences. The first pattern stops after subject verb. The second pattern adds on what's called a direct object, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a second. And the third pattern talks about the subject complement. So the first sentence pattern that we're going to talk about is the subject plus action verb pattern. And you can see what I've got up here is a sentence diagram. Before you start groaning, I know sentence diagramming, it's so boring, but visually, I'm a visual learner and it helps me to see how things are laid out. So for those visual learners out there, here is your sentence diagram. This is the very basic of sentence diagrams that you can have. You'll notice there is a subject slot and a verb slot. That is where the subject and verb of your sentence will go. So if we were to have a two-word sentence, like let's say dogs bark, dogs would go into the subject slot and bark would go into the verb slot. Other two-word sentences could be things like time flies, or it rained, or telephones ring. So that's just the most very basic type of sentence where you have a subject, which would be a noun, and then an action verb. So two-word sentences, very simple. This is the most simple sentence pattern that we have. And you'll notice here I've just highlighted for you dogs would be the subject of the sentence dogs bark. And so it's in pink, and bark would be the verb. So it's in green. And then I've given you the pink and green of the other three sentences as well. So time being the subject, flies being the verb, it is actually a subject. It is a pronoun, so it's a subject. Rained is a verb. And then telephone, that's a thing. So telephones ring. A quick note, now that we're talking about two-word sentences, a quick note on subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement. When you have a singular subject, so I've given some examples here, dog, telephone, a girl, those are all singular, one thing, one dog, one telephone, one girl. Notice the singular verbs that go along with those singular subjects. So dog barks, telephone rings, a girl cries. What you may notice about all three of those singular verbs is that they have an S at the end. Strange, right? When you have a plural subject, meaning more than one, so you have more than one dog, making it dogs, or more than one telephone, making it telephones, or more than one girl, making it girls, your verb and I'm sorry, this should say not singular verb, but should say plural verb, sorry. Typo, okay. Plural verbs are going to have no S. So dogs bark, telephones ring, girls cry. Notice anything? Well, you may have noticed that singular verbs end in an S and plural verbs do not. That's the opposite of nouns. When we make a noun, that's a person, place, or thing. When we make a noun plural, they have an S. So verbs follow the opposite S rule of nouns. Singular verbs have an S. Plural verbs generally do not. Weird. Okay, enough about verbs and subject-verb agreement. The next thing we're going to look at is pattern number 2. That is a subject plus an action verb plus a direct object. What's a direct object, Ms. Sheila? Well, a direct object is an object, or a noun, that receives the action of the verb. For example, I threw the ball. The ball is what is being thrown, thus it is receiving the action. I'm the one throwing it. The ball is being thrown. It is literally receiving the throwing action. Therefore, the ball is the direct object. So this is what the sentence diagram for pattern 2 looks like. You notice the same line here. We've got the line going through the vertical line going through the horizontal line that separates the subject and the verb. And then we put this tiny little line over here that doesn't all the way go through the horizontal line, and that's where you would put your direct object. So a sentence with a direct object would look like this. Dogs chase cars. The cars are the direct object. They are what is being chased by the dogs. What would happen if I just had dogs chase and I took out cars? Would that sentence make any sense? No, it wouldn't. So one thing you might notice about direct object action verbs is that they need the direct object in order to make sense. So here we go. We call that a transitive verb. So when a verb needs the direct object to make sense, like in my example, dogs chase cars, we said dogs chase. That's not a complete sentence. You'd say, chase what, Miss Sheila? You're not making any sense. So you have to add in the direct object of cars. So when a verb requires a direct object to make sense, that verb is called a transitive verb. Just FYI. Okay, the third sentence pattern that we're going to talk about today, and the final sentence pattern that we're going to talk about today, is the subject plus linking verb plus subject complement. What's a linking verb? Action verbs, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's verbs that are in action. Someone's doing something, something is happening. Linking verbs are a little bit more confusing sometimes because they don't necessarily have an action associated with them. Rather, they link the subject to the subject complement. And the subject complement generally describes or renames the subject. So in my example, the food tastes good. Good describes the food and therefore is a subject complement. What's good? The food's good. Okay? Verb tastes links those two together. You couldn't just say the food good. That sentence doesn't make any sense. What about the food good? The food tastes good. So tastes is the verb there, and it's a linking verb because it links together the subject and the subject complement. Here is what the diagram looks like for the third pattern. You can see we have same thing, a subject and a verb slot. Okay, there's a horizontal line and then a vertical line completely cutting in half the horizontal line, and that separates your subject from your verb. And then we have this diagonal line that does not go through the horizontal line, and that's where you put your subject complement. So a subject complement or a linking verb sentence would look like this. Dogs are mammals. Okay, mammals renames or describes dogs. Are is a linking verb that connects those two words together. So we have dogs as the subject, are is the linking verb, and mammals is the subject complement. Okay, that is all I have for you today on sentence patterns. Thrilling, I know. So go ahead and watch this video again if you would like to, if you are confused. If not, you should have some sentence pattern notes that you can fill out. Remember, these are due Friday of the week that they were assigned, so don't delay.